Am I the asshole for telling my son that he needs to live with the consequences of ignoring what his children were trying to tell him? I never thought I'd be in a position where I'd have to explain to my son how bad things had gotten, but here we are. It's like watching a train wreck unfold in slow motion, and for years I stood on the sidelines trying to warn him, trying to help him, but every time I spoke up, it was as if my words were nothing more than background noise. It all started when my son, a man I had watched grow into adulthood, found a new love. His first wife, a woman I had grown close to, passed away when their children, my grandkids, were still so young. The loss hit everyone hard, especially my son. For years he grieved in silence, or at least that's how it seemed on the surface. But like many people do in grief, he eventually sought comfort in someone new. Her name was Sarah, and she came with her own baggage, 2 teenage children from a previous marriage. From the start, it was clear things weren't going to be easy. My grandkids, both still in their early teens at the time, were adjusting to life without their mom, navigating a world where their dad was now occupied with this new woman and her kids. It wasn't an ideal situation, but we hoped it would stabilize with time. It didn't. The tension between the 2 sets of kids was immediate and palpable. Sarah's children, teenagers at the time, weren't thrilled about having my grandkids around. It wasn't just typical sibling rivalry. No, it was much darker. They were cruel, openly cruel. They made comments about my grandkids' late mother, saying things that no child should ever hear. They told my grandkids that their mom had wanted to die, that no one would ever love them, that they didn't belong in their new family. The jealousy, the venom, nothing about it was normal sibling behavior. My grandkids told me about it. They came to my wife and me, tears in their eyes, asking why their dad wasn't doing anything to stop it. They told us about broken toys, gifts that Sarah's kids had destroyed, and the constant barrage of cruel words. Of course, we spoke to my son, trying to get through to him. We begged him to listen. But he didn't. It was as though his new life with Sarah was more important than the welfare of his own children. I remember feeling this knot of frustration in my chest every time he brushed us off. It was like he couldn't see what was happening right under his nose. My wife, ever the peacekeeper, tried again, this time speaking directly with Sarah before the wedding. She expressed her concern about how the kids were being treated, and Sarah promised it would get better, that with time, everyone would adjust. We hoped she was right. But she wasn't. Things only got worse. 4 years my grandkids lived under that roof, dealing with Sarah's kids' bullying and their father's neglect. My son was no better than a spectator, refusing to acknowledge what was happening in his own home. I don't think he wanted to believe it, or maybe he just didn't want to deal with the uncomfortable truth. His new family dynamic was harming his children. It was hard to watch, harder still to know my grandkids were sinking deeper into misery every day, while their father seemed to be in denial. We, my wife and I, tried to be a stable presence for them, offering them the comfort and support they needed. But it wasn't enough. They began spending more and more time with us, retreating from their own father. They wanted out, but they couldn't escape the situation. We fought for custody of them, but the courts turned us down. It was devastating. And still, my son didn't seem to grasp the depth of the damage. Not until much later. The breaking point came when my granddaughter turned 16. It was supposed to be a day of celebration, but it ended in heartbreak. She received an art kit, something she had wanted for a long time, and it set off Sarah's kids like a fuse on a powder keg. They called her names, which baby was one of the tamer insults, and in a fit of rage they broke part of the art kit. I'll never forget the look on my granddaughter's face, devastation, disbelief, and yet a resignation that this was just how things were going to be. She didn't even cry, she was too used to it. We spoke up then, loud and clear, telling my son and his wife that enough was enough. But once again they did nothing. No apologies. No consequences. Just silence. I could feel the years of frustration building up in me and I couldn't hold it in anymore. One day when my son called me asking why we tried to get custody of his children, I finally said what I had been thinking for years. I told him the truth, he had failed them. He had allowed them to suffer for far too long, all so he could stay married and keep the peace. The damage was done, and now he had to live with the consequences of ignoring his children's pain. I told him he had chosen his new life over their well-being, and now that the relationship with his kids was beyond repair, he couldn't just turn around and expect everything to be fine. He had put his own happiness first and his kids were paying the price. It wasn't about me or my wife trying to turn them against him. It was about him failing to listen to their cries for help. The anger in his voice when he yelled at me was something I hadn't heard in years. He accused me of making him feel like a failure as a parent, of making him feel like he had ruined everything. But I wasn't trying to make him feel bad. I was trying to make him see the truth. I wanted him to understand that this was the fallout of his inaction. He could blame me, blame my wife, or even blame his ex-wife, but at the end of the day, it was his decision to ignore his kids when they needed him the most that had led to this mess. My son hung up on me that day. I didn't chase him. I knew he wasn't ready to hear the truth. Maybe he never would be. But the truth was this: when you ignore the pain of your children for so long, when you let them fend for themselves in a house filled with hatred, there's no quick fix. You can't just show up one day and expect everything to be okay. My grandkids, for all their pain, have found some peace. They may not have their dad in the way they should, but they've found stability in each other and in us. It's not ideal, but it's the best we can do. As for my son, I don't know if he'll ever truly understand what he's done. But one thing is for sure: he's living with the consequences of his choices.